Hello and welcome to the 11th episode of the D91 Labs Idea Series, a series where we hope to highlight research, innovation, and ideas in the fintech and financial sector. I am Monami Dasgupta, Head of Research of D91 Labs, and I will be hosting today's session. Before we go ahead with today's session, I would like to focus a little bit more on why this episode is important for all fintech founders, designers, and researchers. In India, we have made substantial strides in bank account ownership for the majority of the population. However, that's just the beginning. We still have unimpressive adoption of basic financial products like savings, insurance, and credit. The segment of the population that is last in line to adopt any financial product is often from the low income households, rural areas, and have limited know how about technology as well as are new to the internet. Given this context, today we have two experts with us from IDEO who have spent considerable time and effort to not only understand this issue, but also create an open source playbook for emerging market practitioners who are building for this cohort. I would like to welcome Kanika and Anukriti. Kanika Kumar is a creative product strategist with 15 plus years of experience in building and scaling customer centric products. Her expertise lies in 0 to 1 exploration, prototyping, customer research, as well as insight mapping. At IDEO, she leads the fintech portfolio, acting as a product manager, advisor, and investor to early stage and high growth startups, as well as large financial institutions and corporations, as they think about new product innovations and growth. She's helped to build and launch products reaching over 20 million customers. She has an MBA from the SETS Business School, University of Oxford, and is an alumni of the World Economic Forum Global Shaper community. Anukriti, on the other hand, is a product lead specializing in digital innovation, user experience, and systems thinking. Currently, she leads product design and strategy at IDEO Last Mile Money, where she focuses on helping organizations achieve product market fit and accelerating financial inclusion at a macro level. She also has 10 plus years of experience partnering with clients across a range of countries and industries that use design and technology to tackle a diverse set of challenges and help organizations craft a sustainable vision for the future. Anukriti holds a master's in interaction design from Carnegie Mellon University and a bachelor's degree in visual communication from Srishti Institute of Art. Welcome to Idea Series, Anukriti and Kanika. So let's go straight into the insightful playbook that you have created. And, all of us at D91, we've spent a lot of time kind of just going through the playbook in as much detail as, we could. My first question to you, Kanika, is what was the motivation behind creating this beautiful playbook for the last mile users?
Thanks for that question, Manami, and thanks for having us. So maybe just to give some quick context to everyone on what Last Mile Money is. So Last Mile Money is a 5-year innovation program that invests in products and services that connect underserved and underbanked customers to the digital economy. And so really our goal over the last 5 years has been to bring a more human-centered approach to product design, especially when it comes to designing digital financial products. And over the last 5 years, we've built over 100 prototypes, and nearly 25% of those are today in market at different stages of scale. But the one thing we learned through all of this work is that designing for low-income customers or new to internet customers and low literate customers really requires us to think differently. It's not easy to take what we are used to, which is seamless, friction-free, clean design, and expect it to apply and work for such users, because their needs and their contexts are so different from us. And while many of their contexts are different, what we have also learned is that many of their challenges and what they're seeking from digital financial products are quite similar, especially when it comes to things like trust, when it comes to things like feeling confident to complete a transaction. And that's kind of what we've learned about what's common between last mile users and their needs in digital financial products. And at the same time, when we were working with product teams over the last few years, we learned that they had, across kinds of products that they were building, it didn't matter whether they were building a savings product or a credit product, and it sometimes didn't even matter which region or country they were building from, they had similar questions around what are the mental models these users use when making decisions around finances. And we noticed that they have similar challenges in their product adoption and usage journeys. And that's when we started to think about what it might look like to share more inspiration from our work. And so we created a really quick and dirty library of all of our work from these years and building with so many different partners as a way to inspire product teams to think of ways to address these challenges that they had brought up around trust, literacy, usage. And we saw that they derived a lot of value from real world, validated, and tangible examples. So that made us think of what it would look like to create a more easy to use open source toolkit of sorts. And that's what kind of led us to building the financial confidence playbook. You can almost think of it as a library of inspiration, of visual ideas and representations of common challenges that any product team that's building digital financial products faces when it comes to last mile users or new to internet users. And these are all validated to some degree through user research, in many cases through actual in-market work. But the one thing I do say about playbooks and toolkits is that we like to think of them as a foundation that you can jump off to save some time and effort and to hopefully find product market fit quickly. But it is not the answer. So we urge you to use it as a starting point, and we like to call it a baseline, and then to build from it.
Thank you so much, Kanika, for that insight. I mean, that's lovely. And the more conversations we have, even within the Indian fintech industry, often it is very difficult to even get to a good starting point and to kind of come to, cope with all the information we have and distill that information in a way that you can create products and also have a product market fit for a lot of the products that we are building in the country. Turning to you, Anukriti, there's something that I observed in the financial confidence playbook is that it suggested many principles for digital financial products that can serve the last mile users. Can you tell me what are some of the biggest learnings that you've applied of these principles across, use cases and product flows?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the question, Monami. And I think it's an interesting one because there's so many principles. So I'll take a step back and think about these learnings as like bigger shifts that we've seen sort of work across contexts, across regions, across use cases almost. So one shift that comes to mind is the shifting from percentages to plain everyday language. And we've often heard, and especially in India, when it comes to, hearing from banking agents, we heard that the users they serve often struggle with formal finance terminology. They don't understand banking terms, but at the same time, they're adept at like sort of understanding how to work their finances, their day-to-day sort of cash flows, and planning for somewhat of a resilient future for their families, right? And then when it comes to us, like product designers or people who run the finance field, we love numbers, right? We love calculations. Probably that's why we're all over here. But when they think of their money, they're not thinking about these numbers or percentages in the same way you and I think about it. We've done some research and we've asked them, how do you think about interest on your savings? And very rarely will they say, oh, I'm earning 10% for my, savings product. They'll probably talk in whole numbers. They'll say, I earn 50 rupees for every 1,000 rupees that I put into my savings group. So we think about how do we kind of shift this idea of like making percentages the more obvious, or like complex terminology the more obvious financial communication, and shifting that away to thinking about ways in which calculations can be made easier. How can we adopt mental models that are more intuitive to them and talk in whole numbers, talk in ways in which they can understand what they walk away with. One example that comes to mind that we've often worked with is in terms of speaking the language that amplifies this idea that money is both functional and emotional, right? And instead of saying, hey, you're signing up for a fixed deposit account or a recurring deposit account, how can you ask them a simple question of like, what are you saving up for, and tangibly build in this idea of like that financial goal they want to unlock, whether it's a small TV, whether it's, cash for Diwali that may be coming up, or saving up for my child's future education or marriage that comes up. So really thinking about language that's more common, ways in which that they think about their money, and building that into, financial communication. So that's one big shift. The other shift that I think I can think about is this idea of shifting from all at once to one at a time. And we've often heard of the phrase of, less is more, and it cannot be more true when it comes to designing for financial services for the last mile user. Oftentimes as product leaders, I think what tends to happen is that we throw in all of those great features we've designed into an app, right? And we are like, oh, our app can do savings, you can remit money to it, you can get airtime as well, and even get credit. And at IDEO, we often think of this as the kitchen sink design, where, the idea is to just throw in everything all at once, all together. But rarely do these sort of users think about your product like that. They often just come for that one basic value add that you're giving to them in their lives, right? And getting overwhelmed is super easy, where they almost start believing that this is not for them. And especially when we put that into this context of the unknown digital world, it's even tougher. So think about ways in which we can sort of break it down for them and build up to the complexity instead of giving it all to them on a platter right from the start, right? And them finding it hard to navigate their way through, and building this confidence and trust over time. One example that comes to mind is actually a startup in India, which is Mool, a neobank. And they did something really interesting around building in for that KYC complexity. And they broke it down into a step-by-step process. And they said, okay, so as much KYC you give us, here's the sort of value or the feature we unlock for you. And there's something really interesting about this. We think of this as the look before you leap principle, right? Like where instead of showcasing them everything, how can we allow users to get a feel of what's to come? How can we give them a quick win or a quick sort of showcase of your value by letting them get into your homepage instead of asking them to, hey, in order to do this, you need to give us like your financial information, your personal information, upload an ID card, all of those things together. So thinking of ways in which we can make app discovery feel more exciting and more sort of motivating for these users, and making it simpler for them.
Right.
And one last one that comes to mind, and is this idea of shifting from reactive troubleshooting to proactive support. So thinking about these users and their world, screens are small, text is tough to read, literacy is limited, and oftentimes these on-screen keyboards are hard to use, right? And we've noticed this across like contexts that like digital financial services especially start feeling very scary, where there's fear of like, I'll make a small mistake and that would mean that my money is lost forever, right? And oftentimes like one bad experience can set them back significantly, both in terms of the trust they have with the single product, but also in their confidence in their ability to use these products in general. We often think about ways in which we can think of prevention is better than cure as an analog here, where how can you support them to make fewer errors, provide them with friction so that they can reconsider the step that they're taking, proactively thinking of like negative flows and error flows as a feature and not a bug, where we say, okay, we'll figure out ways to make them feel more confident, make them feel more supported in this process. Now Money is a great example in UAE that does like remittances for migrant workers. And we realized that most of these migrant workers were struggling with giving their account information. And we realized that, but at the same time, a lot of them were carrying like past exchange house receipts in their wallet. So we said, okay, can we sort of build for multiple modes of interaction over here, and help them sort of upload that receipt instead of filling out every piece of information in text, building for that confidence, building for that ability to kind of, reduce that fear in the moment.
Right. Very interesting principles. I really enjoyed listening to the kitchen sink analogy because nothing explains it as well as that. And I see that it's a combination, these principles cut across. Some of it is a product design problem, some of it is a language issue, some of it is an interface issue. So it cuts across a lot of spaces of solution. And it's not only one, but all of it can create so much more confidence for the end user. Carrying on from the previous question that we were just talking about, let's probably zoom in a bit more into another idea that came up in the playbook, which was the idea of shifting design from a singular or a bi-party interaction to collective interactions. Could you share more on why it's necessary to incorporate that?
Sure, I'm happy to take that. Yeah. So I think most of us might know this, but sometimes it's not top of mind when we're designing for these users, right? So we all recognize and know that people at the last mile, especially in countries like India, operate so much in communities, in household setups where there are collective decision making moments, and so much more than in urban areas. They're very connected to the communities they live in. They operate in trust circles, especially with those in their vicinity. So they rely on their banking correspondent to help them make decisions on their financials. They rely on community elders to make decisions on investments that they make. They rely on educated family members to navigate this new digital world that they're all slowly getting used to and familiar with. And they really consider these people in their community, their confidants and their advisors. And, we've all maybe seen this in India, sometimes in urban areas, but very often in rural areas, where when you go there, you'll see a group of people always coming together to help someone. They're always deciding, conversing, making decisions together. And as you and as us as product designers, or product managers, as we think of building products for these kind of users, a question that we like to ask ourselves is, how do we mimic some of these elements of community and engagement and relationships in the digital world, while of course safeguarding and building those guardrails for privacy and handoffs and literacy levels? We really believe that digital is only the start. In many cases, it has to be high tech with high touch. We really like to talk about the high tech and high touch approach. Many people call it the phygital approach. And we really think that that is the way to go to support adoption. The goal might be that in the future, it will be all tech, but not today. Today, it still needs to be accompanied with a fairly significant in-person model, or at least an assisted model. One of the examples that you'll see in the playbook, but that we like to talk about, is how can you be cognizant of building a digital experience that is an assisted experience? So think of a bookkeeper in an SAG group. She generally comes into the meeting and then she takes notes in her book. And now in the digital world, she's doing it in an even more alien-like device. Or a banking correspondent who is now got a tablet and basically filling all your information. What does it really look like to build more trust and engagement when you're introducing a digital device or a digital experience in that assisted moment, right? So one prototype we experimented with, this was a bunch of ideas we developed for NRLM, in fact, was when a bookkeeper is using a tablet or a phone to record a transaction, what does it look like for her to take one small moment to turn the phone or the tablet towards the customer, and she sees in clear and bold numbers what is the transaction that has been inputted? It creates a level of trust and confidence that my information is accurately inputted. And it allows for a more explicit confirmation of that information of that person. Additionally, what we've learned, and this goes back to the community element, is sometimes in this moment of verification or confirmation, it's not only the person who you're interacting with that has to sign off. Sometimes they like to take advice from a family member, or it is a joint decision with their husband or their child. And so while one aspect is reviewing and confirming, another aspect is giving consent and receiving consent from necessary, stakeholders in your community that you need to receive that from. This could be in the form of a way to get verbal consent, like how do you explicitly capture verbal consent, or how do you explicitly receive an OTP? And so what does it look like when there is a device handoff in a sense, right? Like an OTP is going to another device and then being inputted into the assistance device, for example, or into the customer's device if the OTP is going to someone else. What does that look like? One example of this work that we did was with a working capital product in Pakistan. And a lot of these low-income merchants or Kirana store owners are quite concerned about loans or credit being Islamic compliant. And because they operate in social circles, they need sometimes validation from their father or brother who they run the store with. And so similar to what you now see quite popularly in UPI apps, where there is the send screenshot option at the end of the transaction, we created a similar feature that allowed you to share information about Islamic compliance from a credible source of that for that product with family members to receive consent before you go ahead, or to just inform them before you go ahead. And these are ways we think it's important to incorporate elements of collective interaction or a more community-based transaction, as opposed to it being just singularly an interaction with your customer, especially when you're thinking about last mile users who operate in households and communities.
Right. No, this is really interesting because what I'm hearing is there is a little bit of a requirement to mimic the actual community behavior, and you don't want the digital or the tech field to kind of come in the way of people's way of dealing with money, or create so much more distrust that they leave the app or have more like factions within the same household. So really interesting to know that. And with that, I want to go to my last question, which is a little bit of understanding of how this playbook can be used. So the one when we went through the playbook, it was packed with insights, solutions, and ideas. I wanted to make this a little bit easier for our audience to understand how it can be used and how it can be applied. So, for example, let's say there is somebody called Priya, who's a product manager at a well-funded fintech company, probably in India, and they're trying to build a lending app for the last mile customer. How do you think Priya can best use this playbook? And, should she kind of go through the use case route or the product flow path? What would your advice be for her?
Such an interesting take on this question, and hear you, Monami, on like kind of helping people see how they can put this into action, because that's the biggest sort of goal for the playbook. So I think before I get into the details of like what Priya could do on the website, and I would definitely love to walk through the website for her in this scenario, maybe just taking like a quick sort of step back to talk a bit about the playbook and how it's structured, and how that can be useful to sort of anybody who comes into it for the first time, right? So Kanika shared this earlier, but we've designed this playbook in a way that it fits into anybody's sort of product cycle, and irrespective of that financial product that they're sort of building. And hopefully Priya would too find something inspiring and interesting in here. To quickly talk about the structure of the playbook, so we've divided all of our pages into two big sections. So the first is use cases, which are the types of financial products or service that one is bringing to these users. And what a lot of these pages will help give inspiration around is how to make these more last mile aligned. So think about, designing for savings, credit, digital storefronts, for example, all of those sort of sit there. And then the other part is product flows. So we think about product flows in a way that they cover a step in the user's journey. And this might occur across like all products, irrespective of their use case. And the playbook will show you how to solve for common challenges, in moments like, hey, I'm struggling with onboarding and getting users to use my app. I don't know how to build my navigation and my homepage. Give me inspiration. So some of those sort of cross-cutting pieces will sit at the product flow level. And across all of these, you'll see like across all the pages, there are a few key building blocks, right? Any page that you hit, you'll see first the unique needs of the users on and what's on top of mind for them. These are sort of like quick sort of synthesis of all of our research when it comes to that particular context. And then the second is moments that matter, which are, understanding key moments to design for in the journey, and ones that we see as critical to the success of any sort of product. And within each moment, if you double tap into it, you'll see broad principles to keep in mind. And one important thing that we've embedded in all of these is to showcase how each principle looks like in action, so that you can take away a visual example from, the prototypes and products we've designed, and get sort of inspiration from them in terms of what it could look like in terms of your product or in terms of the testing you might be conducting. That's broadly, a bit of a lay of the land in terms of how the playbook is structured. And if it's okay, I would love to screen share right now and just showcase the playbook, a walkthrough of the playbook. So this is the homepage. I will quickly jump into how someone like Priya can explore. She has the same options up top at the nav, but also this option on the homepage. In her case, let's say we know very clearly she has a lending product. Let's start with like the credit page. For example, the first page will give her context on, why credit is different for last mile users and what they think about it when it comes to fitting into their lives. And we've, of course, seen that credit is a big sort of challenge for these users. They're stuck with informal loans, with exploitive interest rates, and especially because they can't bring that financial data trail that everybody sort of seeks, right? So how can we think about credit a bit more differently and responsibly when it comes to building for their resilience? The next section is the section around, what's top of mind for them. Oftentimes, when these people are thinking about a credit product, there are lots of like questions, clarifications, concerns that are top of mind. Some of those are like, when will my money come into the wallet? How can this repayment schedule make sense if my income is variable and I don't get the money? Or understand these terms so that, like, let's say a few months down the line, I'm not paying up like a hefty fine, or I'm not hit by a surprise down the road. So those are some things to keep in mind when it comes to the last mile user and their use of a lending product. A few key moments to design for in the moment of credit is first the moment of discovery, right? And especially when it comes to discovering formal credit, which is so different from all the other credit they're used to, what's good, what's not, how to take one out, some of that, answers that we can give them in the starting moment. The second moment is the moment of loan application. So helping them understand the terms, building that confidence in what they're about to do and what it means for what's to come. Oftentimes we've seen most products sort of really struggle at the repayment stage. So everybody sort of designs till the point of we'll get our user some credit. And then what happens few months down the line is like, hey, we're not getting that money back. And they're like, how can we design for repayments in a way that it's seamless and gets people to pay that money back? Repeat loan, of course, is common, but also thinking about ways in which we don't just put them into a cycle of like one credit after the other. How can we actually think about growing their business or their families or their finances through that? And then, of course, group-based lending is a common sort of practice, especially in the context of these sort of users. So how can we think about trust and transparency when it comes to credit together? Very quickly, I'll just take one quick page and showcase what it has. So for example, repayments, a few principles to keep in mind are how can we help them stay on track, and thinking about the idea of flexibility and forgiveness within limits. A thing about helping them stay on track is what I spoke about, where they manage their cash flows in day-to-day sort of flows, right? Not months and years. There's also income variability that comes into play. So oftentimes repayments can fall through the cracks. There's something more emergent or more important that comes into mind. So good design builds for guided repayment flows, thinking about notifications and reminders as they go, thinking about colors so that they can get quick sort of updates on what their status is, and ways in which they can think about smart suggestions for where to put that money from or plan for it differently. And then finally, around flexibility within forgiveness, thinking about ways in which you can provide them different formats through which they can convert their cash to digital when it comes to paying you back. Thinking about flexibility because sometimes, like I said, like money might not be available and you might slip onto one of the repayments. So ways in which you can build for repayment models and approaches from pay off fast versus pay off slowly. Think about different modalities through which they can repay you and highlighting what the differences are. Of course, agent support goes a long way. And then finally, thinking about like building for that income variability as a reality and providing like maybe forgiveness or allowing them to delay one or two repayments in this right sort of model with that. And if Priya wants, she can explore other sort of moments. We also have a library that she can explore, which has end-to-end flows and it has the before and after of any sort of inspiration she might be inspired by on the website. So hopefully between all of these different resources, principles, ideas, Pia will find something useful for her product.
Right. I really love how detailed this is. And there's definitely so much for anybody who's even building one part of it. Even if someone's building like a TSP for a repayment kind of feature, or someone's building the onboarding process, there's so much there for somebody to kind of take up. And it goes way beyond UI UX. It goes into, kind of marrying the insights with actual product and feature level innovations, and then one level further on how it should be actually looking for a last mile user to use it in a way that's comfortable for them. Thank you so much, Kanika and Anukriti, for sharing these insights and the tangible solutions with us. We really hope that these ideas are widely discussed in the fintech industry, financial industry, and adopted by practitioners and researchers. And hopefully, the underbanked gets closer to using suitable financial products. As you mentioned, this is a starting point. I hope that starting point goes a long way. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you for having us,
It's a
Monami.
pleasure.
This was great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Awesome. And to all our viewers, along with watching this episode on YouTube, you can also now listen to this conversation on our D91 Labs podcast, which is available on Spotify, Google, and Substack. So please go ahead and subscribe, and you will hear from us very soon again.